They left for the big family trip, 4 cars, 17 people, one group chat, without me. I woke up to an empty house. When I called, Mom said, "We thought you were in the van with your cousins." I said nothing. 2 hours later, my sister accidentally sent me a screenshot meant for her friend. "He's really not here." OMG. Our plan worked. I just replied, "Merry Christmas." Then I quietly canceled the $15,500 booking. And that was only step one. This is the story of how my own mother looked me dead in the eyes and snarled, "Get out and don't bother coming back," shattering everything I thought I knew about family. Just 3 weeks later, my father called, his voice tight with panic. The bank froze the mortgage. Why? You see, until that moment, Amanda, a 23-year-old fresh out of college, believed I had a normal, if sometimes complicated, family. Just 8 weeks before everything imploded, I was walking across the graduation stage, diploma clutched in my hand, feeling like the world was my oyster. My business degree was hard-won, earned through 4 years of late nights, part-time jobs, and enough instant ramen to feed a small army. My dad, Gregory, was my biggest cheerleader, beaming from the audience, whistling so loud our whole row laughed. My mom, Pamela, sat beside him, smiling politely, but I caught her checking her watch. That pretty much summed us up. Dad was my rock, always ready with a bad joke or a shoulder to cry on. Mom? She was complicated. Growing up, Mom was the disciplinarian, the one who pushed me for perfect grades and the right extracurriculars. Nothing was ever quite good enough. On a roll? Why wasn't I valedictorian? Second place in a debate? Why not first? Still, I thought we had a functional relationship, if not a warm and fuzzy one. Moving back home after graduation seemed like the smart play. The job market was brutal, and I figured I'd save money for 6 months. Dad was thrilled. "The house feels empty without you, kiddo," he'd said, helping me carry boxes up to my old bedroom, still painted the lavender I'd picked out at 14. I really tried to be a good guest. Every morning, I was up early making coffee before Dad left for the insurance office. I cleaned up after myself, did extra chores, cooked dinner at least 3 nights a week. Mom would come home exhausted from her administrative job at the hospital, and I truly hoped my help eased some of her stress. 2 weeks in, a miracle happened. I landed an interview at Wilson Financial, a respected firm. The interview went surprisingly well, and they offered me a position on the spot. The salary was better than I expected for entry level, and they even offered partial tuition reimbursement for an MBA. The only catch? They needed me to start in 3 weeks, not immediately, due to a system transition. That evening, I brought home a celebratory cake. Dad popped open a bottle of champagne he'd been saving. And for once, even Mom seemed genuinely happy for me. She asked about the benefits package, seemed impressed by my answers. "Well, it seems like all those tuition payments finally paid off," she'd said, which, coming from her, was practically a standing ovation. We had a family dinner that felt like old times, before the subtle tension had crept into our household. Dad told stories about his first job, and Mom actually laughed at his jokes. I felt hopeful. Maybe this new chapter would actually improve things between us. During those 3 weeks before my job started, I tried to be as useful as possible. Dad mentioned they were struggling with online banking, so I spent an afternoon showing them how to set everything up. They weren't tech-savvy, so I patiently walked them through creating secure passwords, navigating the website. "This is why we had kids," Dad joked, built-in tech support. Mom watched carefully, asking several questions about security, worried about identity theft. I assured her that strong passwords and not sharing information would keep them safe. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. Mom had been increasingly tense the previous 2 weeks. She'd take phone calls in hushed tones, quickly hanging up if I walked into the room. Mail would disappear from the counter before I could see who it was addressed to. But I chalked it up to her usual work stress, maybe combined with having an adult daughter back in the house. The weekend before everything blew up, we went to Aunt Susan's for a family barbecue. Dad's sister had always been so kind to me, and she made a big fuss about my new job. Mom was unusually quiet, though, and on the drive home, She and Dad had a whispered argument I couldn't quite hear from the back seat. When I asked if everything was okay, Dad forced a smile and said it was just boring adult stuff. I wish I had pushed harder. I wish I had seen what was coming. But I had no idea that in just a few days, my mother would be screaming at me to get out of her house, and my entire world would be turned upside down. The morning the unraveling began started like any other. I woke early, made coffee, and was scrolling through my phone when Mom came downstairs. She didn't say good morning, which wasn't unusual, but what happened next definitely was. I went upstairs to shower. When I came back to my room, I found Mom going through a stack of my mail on my desk. She had my bank statement open in her hands. "What are you doing?" I asked, stunned. She didn't even look embarrassed. "This is my house, Amanda. I can look at whatever I want. That's my personal mail. You can't just go through my things." She folded the statement, placing it back on the desk with deliberate slowness. "When you pay the mortgage, you can have privacy." I stood there, mouth open, as she brushed past me. This wasn't like her. My mother could be cold, demanding, but she'd always respected basic boundaries. Something was very, very wrong. Later that morning, while applying for an apartment online, I overheard my parents arguing in their bedroom. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but their voices carried down the hallway. "She's going to find out eventually, Pamela," my father said, his voice tight with stress. "She doesn't need to know anything. It's handled." "How is it handled?" "The calls are coming to the house now." "Lower your voice," my mother hissed. "This is not her problem." "Of course it's her problem. You made it her problem when you decided to." Their voices dropped too low for me to hear the rest, but one phrase came through clearly in my mother's sharp tone. "She owes us." I owed them? For what? Sure, they'd helped with some of my college expenses, but I'd taken out substantial student loans myself. I'd never been under the impression their support came with hidden strings attached. When Dad came downstairs later, I tried to ask him what was going on. "Is everything okay with you and Mom? I heard you arguing." He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than usual. "It's nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart. Just some bills piling up. If you need help, I can contribute now that I have a job lined up." No, he said quickly. "That's not necessary. Your mom is just stressed about work." But the look in his eyes told me he wasn't being truthful. For the first time, I felt a flicker of unease about my father too. He'd always been my ally, the parent I could count on. Now he seemed to be hiding something. That afternoon, I checked all my bank accounts and credit card statements online. Everything looked normal. My credit score was still excellent, the one I'd worked hard to build throughout college. Making every payment on time. Whatever financial problems my parents were having, they didn't seem to involve me directly. Still, the tension in the house was unmistakable. Mom barely spoke to me all day, and Dad seemed to be walking on eggshells around both of us. I decided to make Mom's favorite dinner, lasagna from scratch, as a peace offering. I spent the afternoon grating cheese, layering noodles, simmering sauce, hoping a nice meal might ease whatever was bothering her. When she came home, she barely acknowledged the effort. She ate in near silence, responding to Dad's attempts at conversation with one-word answers. When I asked about her day, she simply said, "Fine," and continued eating. Dad tried to compensate for her coldness by being extra cheerful, but his smile didn't reach his eyes, and I caught him glancing nervously at Mom several times. After dinner, I cleaned up the kitchen alone while my parents retreated to the living room. Through the doorway, I could see them having another hushed conversation. Mom looked angry, gesturing sharply with her hands, while Dad seemed to be pleading with her. I went to bed early that night, unable to shake the feeling that something bad was looming. As I lay awake staring at my ceiling, I heard my mother's voice from downstairs, clear and cold. "She needs to deal with the consequences." I didn't know what consequences she meant, but I would find out all too soon. The next evening, everything exploded. I'd spent the day filling out paperwork for my new job, avoiding my mother as much as possible. Dad had texted to say he'd be working late, which wasn't unusual, but it meant dinner would be just Mom and me. I decided to bring up the elephant in the room directly. As we sat at the kitchen table with plates of leftover lasagna, I took a deep breath. "Mom, I know something's wrong." If the family is having money problems, I want to help. My job starts next week, and I can contribute to bills until things get better. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of contempt and something that looked almost like fear. Now you want to help, she said, her voice brittle. How convenient. What do you mean? I've always been willing to help. Stop playing innocent, Amanda. It doesn't suit you. I put down my fork, completely confused. I honestly don't know what you're talking about. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Let me refresh your memory. Platinum rewards card. $5,000 credit limit. Opened 18 months ago. Ring any bells? I don't have a platinum rewards card, I said slowly, a cold feeling spreading through my stomach. Don't lie to me, she snapped, her voice rising. The account is in your name. Mom, I swear I don't know anything about that card. If there is an account in my name, I didn't open it. For a moment, she stared at me. Then something in her expression shifted, not to understanding or remorse, but to a kind of calculated coldness. If that's how you want to play it. Your father and I opened the card. We needed it for some expenses, and our credit wasn't good enough to qualify. The words hit me like a physical blow. Asterisk, you used my name? My social security number? Without asking me, asterisk, don't be so dramatic. Families help each other. We put you through college, and we needed some help in return. That's identity theft, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes flashed. It's family. But of course, you wouldn't understand loyalty, would you? Asterisk loyalty? You stole my identity. Asterisk, how much did you charge on this card I don't even know about? She waved her hand dismissively. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the payments are late, and now they're calling here asking for you. The room seemed to tilt. Asterisk late payments? So you've been damaging my credit? The credit I worked so hard to build? Asterisk, oh, poor baby and her precious credit score. Mom sneered. Try raising a child and keeping a household running. Try dealing with real problems. I struggled to keep my voice steady. This is a real problem. What you did is illegal. You committed fraud using my information. We're your parents, she shouted, slamming her hand on the table hard enough to make the plates jump. Everything you have is because of us. Your education, your fancy new job, all of it. That doesn't give you the right to steal my identity. How am I supposed to trust you after this? Trust? She laughed again, that same hollow sound. Trust is a luxury. Your father and I did what we had to do. Dad knows about this. The betrayal deepened, spreading through me like poison. Of course he knows. It was his idea to use your information. I couldn't believe it. My father, who had always been my rock, had betrayed me in one of the worst ways possible. How many other accounts have you opened in my name? Mom's expression turned calculating. Just the one card. But something in her eyes told me she was lying. What else, Mom? What else have you done? Nothing that concerns you. It absolutely concerns me if you're using my name and social security number. My whole financial future is at stake. Your future, she spat. What about our future? What about the house you've been living in rent-free? What about all the sacrifices we've made for you? I've never asked you to sacrifice anything. And I offered to pay rent when I moved back in. You and Dad said no. Because we needed something else from you. Something more valuable than your pocket change. The cold feeling in my stomach intensified. Asterisk my credit. My identity. Asterisk, she didn't deny it. Instead, she looked at me with something like satisfaction, as if she was glad I finally understood. We should work together to fix this, I said, trying to be reasonable despite my growing anger and fear. We need to pay off whatever balances are on that card and close the account, and you need to tell me about any other accounts you've opened in my name. There's nothing to fix, she said flatly. The situation is what it is. The situation is fraud. I was shouting now too, all pretense of calm gone. You could go to jail for this. Are you threatening me? Her voice dropped, dangerously low. I'm trying to make you understand how serious this is. My whole financial future could be ruined. Your future, she scoffed. Always about you. So selfish, just like you've always been. The perfect little princess who thinks the world revolves around her. Her words stung. Not because they were true, but because they revealed how little she thought of me, how little she knew me. I've never been selfish. I've always tried to make you proud, to be good enough for you. If you want to make us proud, you'll handle this situation like an adult. Pay the card off and stop complaining. I didn't create this situation. You did. And now you expect me to clean up your mess. Our mess. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You ungrateful little brat. After everything we've done for you. Tears filled my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. What kind of parent steals from their own child? That's when she said it. The words that would change everything. Get out, she hissed. Get out and don't bother coming back. What? I stared at my mother, certain I had misheard her. You heard me. Her face was twisted with anger. I barely recognized her. Get out of my house. Now. Mom, you can't be serious. I looked around wildly, as if searching for someone to confirm this was just a bad dream. Where's Dad? I need to talk to Dad. Your father isn't here to save you this time. And he agrees with me. I couldn't believe it. Dad would never throw me out. I'm going to call him. Go ahead. She folded her arms across her chest. He won't pick up. I grabbed my phone, dialing his number with shaking fingers. It rang and rang before going to voicemail. I tried again, same result. See? Mom's voice was cold with triumph. He knows better than to interfere. I looked at her. This woman who had given birth to me, raised me, and was now throwing me out over a credit card she had fraudulently opened in my name. Something fundamental had broken between us. Something that could never be repaired. Fine, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm inside me. I'll go pack. You have 30 minutes, she called after me as I walked upstairs. In my childhood bedroom, I stood frozen for a moment, unable to process what was happening. The lavender walls I'd once found so comforting now seemed to be closing in on me. Photos of happier times mocked me from their frames. The family vacation to Florida when I was 12, my high school graduation with both parents proudly flanking me, Christmas morning just last year with all of us in matching pajamas. How had we gone from that to this? I grabbed my largest backpack and began stuffing it with essentials, underwear, socks, a few changes of clothes. My mind was racing, trying to figure out where I would go. I had some savings, but not enough for a security deposit and first month's rent. My new job wouldn't start for another week, and I wouldn't get paid for at least 2 weeks after that. As I packed, memories flooded through me. This room had been my sanctuary throughout my childhood, the window seat where I'd read hundreds of books, the desk where I'd studied for the SATs, the closet where I'd hidden when I wanted to escape my mother's criticism. And now I was being forced to leave it all behind. I grabbed my laptop, chargers, toiletries. What else would I need? I had no idea how long I would be gone, or if I would ever come back. The thought made me pause, a pair of jeans clutched in my hands. This might be the last time I ever saw this room. I opened my dresser drawer to grab more clothes and noticed something odd. The folder where I kept my important documents was missing. My birth certificate, social security card, passport, all gone. With growing dread, I searched every drawer, under the bed, checking the closet. Nothing. I stormed downstairs, finding my mother in the living room, calmly watching television as if she hadn't just shattered our family. Where are my documents? I demanded. She didn't even look at me. What documents? My birth certificate, social security card, passport. They're gone from my room. Those are our documents, she said. We're keeping them safe. They're mine. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I need them for my job, for an apartment. You should have thought of that before you turned on your family. I stood there speechless with rage and disbelief. She was punishing me for discovering her fraud by withholding my identity documents. Give them to me, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Now or what? She finally looked at me, her expression almost amused. You'll call the police? Tell them your mother is keeping your documents? They'll laugh you out the door. She was probably right, but I couldn't leave without trying. I marched past her toward their bedroom, determined to find my papers. Don't you dare go in there, she shouted, following me. I ignored her, yanking open their dresser drawers, searching through the papers on their desk. Nothing. She grabbed my backpack, which I'd set down during my search. Time's up. Get out. Not without my documents. They're not here, she said, tossing my backpack at me. And you're not welcome here anymore. I lunged for my backpack, but she held on to one strap. We struggled for a moment, and then the bag tipped, spilling its contents across the floor. My clothes, toiletries, and laptop tumbled out. My mother let go of the empty bag, watching with cold satisfaction as I scrambled to gather my belongings. How can you do this? I asked, looking up at her from the floor, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. I am your daughter. For just an instant, something flickered in her eyes. A hint of the mother I thought I knew. But it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Not anymore, she said. You made your choice. I stuffed everything back into my bag with trembling hands. There was nothing else to say, no way to reach her. Whatever had broken inside her had broken us too. I walked out the front door without looking back. The weight of my backpack was nothing compared to the heaviness in my heart. My car sat in the driveway, a 5-year-old Honda Civic that I'd bought with my own money during sophomore year. At least she couldn't take that from me. I threw my backpack onto the passenger seat and sat behind the wheel, trying to figure out what to do next. Where could I go? Who could I trust? Night was falling as I drove aimlessly through town, past the high school where I'd been valedictorian, past the park where Dad had taught me to ride a bike, past the ice cream shop where we used to go for family treats on summer evenings. Eventually, I parked in the lot of a 24-hour grocery store, too numb to make any decisions. I reclined my seat as far as it would go and stared at the ceiling of my car, replaying the evening's events over and over, looking for something I could have said or done differently. But the truth was, this wasn't my fault. My parents had committed fraud using my identity. And instead of apologizing and making it right, they had thrown me out when I discovered their betrayal. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because I woke to sunlight streaming through my windshield and the harsh reality that I was essentially homeless. My back ached from sleeping in the car and my mouth felt dry and sour. As I sat up and tried to stretch in the confined space, the full weight of my situation hit me. Not only was I without a home, but my credit was damaged. My identity had been compromised. And my own parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, had been the ones to hurt me. In that moment, sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot, I made a decision. I would not be a victim. I would take control of this situation and fight back. My parents had underestimated me, thinking I would either give in to their demands or crumble under pressure. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. My first call that morning was to my friend Stephanie. We'd been college roommates for 3 years before she'd moved in with her boyfriend, Tyler. We'd stayed close, texting regularly and meeting for coffee. "Steph," I said when she answered, my voice cracking slightly. "I need help." To her eternal credit, she didn't hesitate. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" I gave her the condensed version. My parents had committed identity theft using my information, and when I confronted them, my mother had thrown me out. "Oh my God, Amanda," she gasped. "That's terrible. Where are you now?" "Sleeping in my car," I admitted. I didn't know where else to go. "Come here," she said immediately. "You can stay with us as long as you need to." Relief washed over me. "Are you sure? What about Tyler?" "Tyler adores you, and he'll be furious when he hears what happened. Get over here now. I'll make coffee and breakfast." 20 minutes later, I was sitting at Stephanie's kitchen table, a mug of hot coffee warming my hands, as I told her the full story. Tyler joined us halfway through, his expression growing darker as he listened. "That's not just wrong," he said when I finished. "It's illegal. You need to report this." The thought made my stomach clench. Report my own parents? I don't know if I can do that. Stephanie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I know it feels awful, but they committed fraud, Amanda. They stole your identity. If you don't report it, you could be held responsible for whatever debt they've racked up in your name. And who knows how many accounts they've actually opened." Tyler added, "You said your mom claimed it was just one credit card, but she was already lying to you about everything else." They were right, and I knew it. But the idea of potentially sending my own parents to jail made me physically ill. "Let's take this one step at a time," Stephanie suggested, seeing my distress. "First, let's find out exactly what's going on with your credit. We spent the morning visiting the 3 major credit bureaus online. What we found confirmed my worst fears. In addition to the Platinum Rewards card my mother had mentioned, there was a personal loan for $15,000 and a store credit card with a $2,000 balance, all opened within the last 2 years, all in my name, all with recent late payments. "This is worse than I thought," I whispered, staring at the screen in horror. "You need to place a fraud alert on your credit right away," Tyler said. He worked in banking and knew the procedures. "And you need to file a police report." I nodded numbly, still trying to process the extent of the betrayal. My parents hadn't just opened one unauthorized account. They'd been systematically using my identity for years. With Stephanie and Tyler's support, I placed fraud alerts with all 3 credit bureaus. Then came the hardest part, filing a police report for identity theft that would implicate my own parents. The officer who took my report was kind but matter-of-fact. "Unfortunately, we see this kind of thing more often than you'd think," he told me. "Family members are actually the most common perpetrators of identity theft because they have easy access to your personal information." "What will happen to my parents?" I asked, my voice small. "That depends on whether you want to press charges. Some victims just want the fraudulent debts removed from their credit and don't pursue criminal charges against family members." I didn't know what I wanted yet. Part of me was still in shock, unable to believe my parents could do this to me. Another part was furious and wanted them to face consequences for their actions. "You don't have to decide right now," the officer assured me. "The important thing is that you filed the report, which you'll need to dispute the fraudulent accounts." Armed with the police report number, my next stop was the bank that had issued the Platinum Rewards card. I met with a fraud specialist named Melissa, who reviewed my documentation with a sympathetic expression. "I'm so sorry you're going through this," she said. "Identity theft is traumatic enough without it being committed by people you trust." "Will I be able to get the fraudulent charges removed from my credit history?" I asked. "Yes, but it's a process. We'll need to investigate, and you'll need to fill out an identity theft affidavit for each account." As Melissa walked me through the procedures, she noticed something concerning. "There's another inquiry here from 3 months ago. A mortgage lender." "A mortgage?" I felt dizzy. "I haven't applied for a mortgage." She frowned. "It looks like someone did, using your information. It was approved too." "My parents refinanced their mortgage 3 months ago," I said slowly, pieces clicking into place. "They said it was to get a better interest rate." "Using your identity," Melissa confirmed grimly. "That's a much bigger fraud than just a credit card. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars." I left the bank with a stack of forms to fill out and a recommendation for Jessica Barrett, an attorney who specialized in identity theft cases. I called her office from the parking lot and was surprised when they offered me an appointment the same day. Jessica was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s who listened intently as I explained my situation. "Your parents have put you in an impossible position," she said when I finished. "But legally, the path forward is clear. This is fraud, plain and simple." "Even a mortgage?" I asked. "Especially the mortgage. That's bank fraud, which is a federal offense." The severity of what my parents had done was finally sinking in. "Will they go to prison?" Jessica's expression softened slightly. "That depends on many factors, including whether this is their first offense and how cooperative they are. But yes, it's possible." I must have looked as devastated as I felt, because she added, "I understand this is your family, Amanda. These cases are always difficult. But think about what they've done to you. They've damaged your credit, stolen your identity, and when confronted, they threw you out of their house. They're counting on your familial loyalty to protect them from consequences." She was right. My parents, especially my mother, had been manipulating me, banking on the fact that I wouldn't turn them in. They had used my love against me. As I left Jessica's office with a plan to file formal complaints with all the financial institutions involved, my phone rang. It was my father. "Amanda." His voice was strained. "Where are you? Your mother said you left." "Left?" I repeated incredulously. "She threw me out, Dad. She told me to get out and not come back. She was upset. You know how she gets. Come home and we can work this out." "Work out what?" "The fact that you and Mom have been committing fraud using my identity for years." There was a long pause. It's not what you think. Really? Because I've spent all day talking to credit bureaus, the police, and a lawyer, and they all say it's exactly what I think: identity theft and fraud. You went to the police? His voice rose in panic. Amanda, what have you done? What have I done? What have you done, Dad? How could you do this to me? You need to drop this right now, he said, his tone hardening. You're making a big mistake. The mistake was trusting you and Mom. We're your parents. We gave you everything. And now you've taken everything. My home, my credit, my future. Don't be so dramatic. It's just money. Family is more important. I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of sadness. If family was so important, you wouldn't have stolen from me. Amanda, please. His voice softened, turning pleading. Your mother is beside herself. She didn't mean what she said. Come home, and we'll fix this together. For a moment, I wavered. This was my dad, the man who had taught me to ride a bike and checked under my bed for monsters, the parent I had always thought I could trust. But then I remembered the empty folder where my documents should have been. The way my mother had watched me scramble to gather my belongings from the floor. The cold finality in her voice when she'd said, "Not anymore." I can't come home, I said firmly. And I won't drop the fraud reports. What you and Mom did was wrong, and there have to be consequences. You'll regret this, he warned, his tone changing again. When this is all over, and your mother and I are ruined, I hope you'll be satisfied. The call ended, and I sat in my car shaking. My own father had just threatened me for reporting a crime he had committed against me. The world had turned upside down. But despite the fear and sadness, I felt something else growing inside me: resolve. I wouldn't back down. I wouldn't let them manipulate me anymore. For the first time in my life, I was standing up for myself against my parents, and it felt terrifying and empowering all at once. 3 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and adjusting to my new reality. Stephanie and Tyler had converted their home office into a bedroom for me, refusing any rent until I got on my feet. Just buy groceries sometimes, Tyler had said, and keep making that amazing lasagna. I had started my job at Wilson Financial, throwing myself into the work as a distraction from the chaos of my personal life. My coworkers were friendly and professional, and none of them knew the turmoil I was experiencing. I was grateful for the normalcy of the office, the predictable rhythm of meetings and deadlines. The fraud investigations were ongoing, but I had filed all the necessary paperwork and provided statements to the bank security department. Jessica, my attorney, had been worth every penny of her consultation fee, guiding me through the complex process. And though he had left several voicemails, alternating between pleading and thinly veiled threats, something made me answer this time. Hello. What did you do? He demanded, his voice ragged with stress. What are you talking about? The bank froze the mortgage. They're saying it's fraud, and they're launching an investigation. We could lose the house, Amanda. A complex mix of emotions washed over me: vindication, guilt, sadness. I didn't do anything, Dad. You and Mom did this when you used my identity to refinance your mortgage without my knowledge or consent. We were desperate, he shouted. The house was underwater after the market crash, and we couldn't qualify for a refinance on our own. Your credit was our only option. You should have talked to me, asked for my help. Instead, you committed fraud and then threw me out when I discovered it. Your mother threw you out, not me, he said, his voice dropping. I would never have done that. But you didn't stop her. I pointed out. You didn't pick up when I called. You didn't stand up for me. There was a long silence. I couldn't, he finally said. Things are complicated. Explain it to me then. Make me understand how my own parents could do this to me. He sighed heavily. It started small. Just one credit card when the hot water heater broke, and we didn't have the money to replace it. Your mother suggested using your information since our credit was shot after my medical bills a few years back. I remembered my father's hospitalization for pneumonia when I was in college. How worried we had all been, but I hadn't known about any financial problems stemming from it. We planned to pay it off before you ever knew about it, he continued. But then other things came up. The roof. The car transmission. Before we knew it, we were in over our heads, and the mortgage. I prompted. The bank was threatening foreclosure. We were 3 months behind on payments. Using your identity for the refinance it was your mother's idea. But you went along with it. Yes, he admitted. I went along with it. I was weak and scared of losing our home. I closed my eyes, trying to process this new information. Why didn't you just tell me? I would have helped if I could. Your mother wouldn't hear of it. She said we shouldn't burden you with our problems. He paused. And if I'm being honest, I was ashamed. What kind of father can't provide for his family without stealing from his daughter? The raw pain in his voice made my throat tight. Despite everything, I still loved my father. He had made terrible choices, but at least he seemed to recognize that now. The bank investigator came to the house today, he continued. He said all our accounts are frozen pending the fraud investigation. We can't access any of our money, Amanda. And your mother, she's not handling it well. What do you mean? He lowered his voice. There's something I never told you. Your mother has had a gambling problem for years. Online poker, mostly. That's where a lot of the money went. The revelation stunned me. My strict, controlling mother, a gambling addict? It seemed impossible, but it would explain so much. The secrecy, the financial problems, the desperate measures. The stress of the investigation has made it worse, Dad continued. She's barely sleeping, barely eating, just glued to her phone trying to win enough to fix this mess. She needs help, Dad. Professional help. I know, he said quietly. I've known for a long time. But whenever I bring it up, she shuts down completely. I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Pity for my mother's addiction, anger at my father's enabling, frustration that they had dragged me into their dysfunction. I'm sorry about the mortgage and the accounts being frozen, I said finally. But I couldn't let the fraud continue. My entire financial future was at stake. I understand, he said, surprising me. You did what you had to do. What we did was wrong, and now we're facing the consequences. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope that my relationship with my father might eventually heal. He wasn't making excuses anymore. He was accepting responsibility. What will you do now? I asked. Try to negotiate with the bank. Sell the house if we have to. Get your mother some help. He sounded tired, but resolved. And try to make things right with you, if you'll let me. I don't know if things can ever be right again, I said honestly. But I'm willing to talk. That's all I can ask for, he replied. I love you, Amanda. I never stopped. Not for a moment. After we hung up, I sat on my temporary bed in Stephanie and Tyler's converted office, processing everything I'd learned. My mother's gambling addiction cast her actions in a different light, not excusing them, but at least explaining some of her desperation and irrationality. That evening, I told Stephanie and Tyler about my conversation with my father. A gambling addiction? Stephanie said, shaking her head. That actually makes sense. Remember how your mom always had those headaches during family events and would disappear for hours with her phone? I hadn't made that connection, but now that Stephanie mentioned it, it was a clear pattern. My mother had always been intensely private about her phone, clutching it constantly and even taking it to the bathroom. Do you think you'll reconcile with your dad? Tyler asked. Maybe someday, I said. But not with my mom. At least not until she gets help and takes responsibility for what she did. And definitely not until all of this legal and financial mess is sorted out. Over the next few weeks, my life began to stabilize. I found an affordable apartment not far from work and signed a lease, using the limited credit I still had. The fraud alerts had protected me from any new accounts being opened, and the investigations were proceeding, with the fraudulent accounts slowly being removed from my credit report. Jessica had helped me secure new copies of my birth certificate and social security card, allowing me to get a replacement passport as well. Piece by piece, I was reclaiming my identity. My father called weekly, updating me on their situation. They were indeed selling the house, downsizing to an apartment they could afford on their actual income. My mother had initially refused therapy for her gambling addiction, but after the bank rejected their hardship application due to the fraud investigation, she had finally agreed to seek help. She still blames you, Dad admitted during one call. But I think deep down she knows this is her fault. Our fault, I corrected. Is she still angry with me? I asked, hating that I still cared about her opinion despite everything. She's angry at the world right now, he said, but mostly at herself, I think. The therapist says that's common with addiction. The anger is a shield against shame. It was strange to hear my father talking about therapy and addiction so openly. In our family, problems had always been hidden, denied, or blamed on someone else. This new honesty, though born from crisis, felt like a positive change. As my coworkers became friends, I gradually shared parts of my story with them. Their support was unexpected and touching. Diane from accounting offered to review my credit reports with her expert eye. Marcus from the IT department helped me set up enhanced security on all my accounts. Rachel, my cubicle neighbor, invited me to join her support group for adults dealing with family trauma. Family isn't just blood, Rachel told me one day over lunch. It's the people who have your back when things get tough. Looking around at my growing circle of support, my loyal college friend, her kind boyfriend, my empathetic coworkers, I realized she was right. I was building a new kind of family, one based on mutual respect and genuine care, rather than obligation and control. 6 months after being thrown out of my childhood home, I was hosting a small dinner party in my new apartment. As I looked around at the smiling faces of my chosen family, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: peace. A full 6 months had passed since that fateful night at the kitchen table. Winter had given way to spring, and my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. My apartment was small but cozy, decorated with secondhand furniture and plants that Stephanie had helped me pick out. The walls were painted a soft sage green, nothing like the lavender of my childhood room, but comforting in their own way. It was the first space that was truly mine, unmarked by my mother's criticisms or my father's well-meaning but enabling presence. The identity theft investigations had concluded, with all fraudulent accounts removed from my credit report. My credit score was slowly recovering, though Jessica had warned me it would take time to fully rebuild. The most important thing was that I was back in control of my financial identity. As for my parents, they had faced serious consequences. The bank had pursued the mortgage fraud aggressively, resulting in my mother being charged with bank fraud. Due to it being her first criminal offense and her agreement to enter a gambling addiction program, she had received probation rather than jail time. My father had avoided criminal charges by cooperating fully with investigators and demonstrating that he had been under duress from my mother's addiction. They had sold the house where I grew up, using the proceeds to pay off their legitimate debts. They now lived in a small apartment across town. My father had reached out consistently throughout the ordeal, taking full responsibility for his actions and expressing genuine remorse. After 3 months of maintaining boundaries while processing my own feelings, I had agreed to meet him for coffee. That first meeting had been awkward and emotional, with both of us breaking down in tears at different points. But it had also been healing, the beginning of a new, more honest relationship. "I failed you," he had said simply. "As a father, my job was to protect you, and instead I helped hurt you. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make that right, if you'll let me." I had set clear boundaries from the start. "I'm willing to work on our relationship, Dad, but only if you respect my autonomy completely. No more secrets, no more financial entanglements, no pressure to reconcile with Mom until I'm ready, if ever." He had agreed to everything, grateful for any chance to be part of my life again. My mother was a more complicated story. Her gambling addiction had been more severe than anyone had realized, with tens of thousands of dollars lost over the years. The therapist she was seeing as part of her probation had diagnosed her with not just addiction, but narcissistic tendencies that made it difficult for her to acknowledge the harm she had caused. I had received one letter from her, grudgingly accepting some responsibility, but also attempting to justify her actions as necessary sacrifices for the family. The letter had contained no actual apology, just an expectation that I would eventually get over it and return to the fold. I had shown the letter to my own therapist, Dr. Winters, who had helped me see it for what it was, an attempt to reestablish control rather than rebuild trust. Healing doesn't always mean reconciliation, Dr. Winters had told me. Sometimes it means accepting that a relationship may never be healthy and creating appropriate distance to protect yourself. Those words had been liberating. For years, I had tried to earn my mother's approval, to be good enough to deserve her love. Now I understood that her inability to love unconditionally had nothing to do with my worth and everything to do with her own limitations. My father had begun attending therapy as well, learning to establish his own identity separate from my mother's controlling influence. He had even started dating recently, a woman from his support group for partners of gambling addicts. He seemed happier, more authentic than I could remember seeing him in years. "Your mother and I should have separated long ago," he admitted during one of our monthly dinners. But I was afraid. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of failing as a husband. Afraid of what people would think. All that fear led me to make terrible choices. I understood fear better now too. The fear of disappointing my parents had kept me trapped in unhealthy dynamics for years. The fear of conflict had prevented me from setting necessary boundaries. The fear of abandonment had made me accept unacceptable behavior. But through this painful journey, I had discovered my own strength. I had faced my worst fear, being rejected by my own mother, and survived. Not just survived, but grown. My career at Wilson Financial was flourishing. I had received a promotion just 4 months into the job, impressing my supervisors with my work ethic and attention to detail. The steady income had allowed me to build a modest emergency fund, something I now recognized as essential for true independence. I had also discovered a passion for financial literacy, volunteering at a local community center to teach young adults about credit, budgeting, and identity protection. Turning my painful experience into a way to help others had been unexpectedly healing. "You have a gift for explaining complex financial concepts in relatable terms," the program director had told me. "Your students really connect with your story." Sharing my experience publicly hadn't been easy, but each time I saw the light of recognition in someone's eyes, the realization that they weren't alone in their family financial struggles, it became a little easier. One unexpected outcome of the whole ordeal had been my father's growth in financial independence. After decades of deferring to my mother on money matters while she secretly gambled away their savings, he was learning to manage his own finances responsibly. I had helped him set up a secure budget and savings plan, and he had stuck to it faithfully. "I should have learned this stuff years ago," he told me once. "Maybe if I had taken more responsibility for our finances, things wouldn't have spiraled so far out of control." There was truth in that, but I reminded him that my mother's addiction wasn't his fault. "You can't control someone else's choices, Dad. You can only control your own." That had become something of a mantra for me over the past 6 months. I couldn't control my mother's refusal to truly acknowledge the harm she had caused. I couldn't control the fact that some extended family members had taken her side, believing her version of events where I was the ungrateful daughter who had cruelly reported her own parents to the authorities. I couldn't control how long it would take for my credit to fully recover. But I could control my own choices, my own boundaries, my own healing. Tonight, as I looked around at the friends gathered in my apartment, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Stephanie and Tyler were cuddled together on my small couch. Marcus from IT was debating the merits of different streaming services with Rachel from work. My father was in the kitchen, proudly showing off the lasagna recipe I had taught him. These people were my real family now, some related by blood, most not, but all connected by genuine care and respect. As we gathered around my secondhand dining table, I thought about how far I had come from that terrible night when my mother had told me to get out and not come back. In trying to punish me, she had inadvertently set me free. Free from the dysfunctional dynamics that had defined our family for generations. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, raising my glass. "To new beginnings, and to all of you who helped me through the darkest time of my life. I wouldn't be where I am today without you." The glasses clinked, smiles were exchanged, and the conversation flowed easily around the table. Later, as the evening wound down and guests began to leave, my father pulled me aside. "I'm so proud of you, Amanda," he said, his eyes shining with emotion. "Not just for forgiving me, which I still don't feel I deserve, but for the way you've handled everything with such grace and strength." "I learned something important through all this," I told him. "Our worth isn't determined by what others do to us, but by how we choose to respond." I could have let what happened destroy me, make me bitter and mistrustful. Instead, I chose to use it as a catalyst for growth. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Your mother and I, we got so caught up in appearances and what we thought we deserved that we lost sight of what really matters. Integrity, honesty, respect. You've shown more of those qualities than we ever did. As I hugged him goodbye, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The pain hadn't disappeared completely. It probably never would. But it had transformed into something useful, a reminder of my resilience and the importance of choosing authenticity over appearance, truth over comfort. My mother had thrown me out, thinking it would break me or force me to comply with her demands. Instead, it had been the beginning of my true independence, not just financially, but emotionally. In losing what I thought was my only family, I had found a larger, healthier one. And in facing the betrayal of those who should have protected me, I had learned to protect myself, to stand firm in my truth, to set boundaries, to value my own well-being. That, perhaps, was the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most necessary beginnings. Sometimes you have to lose what you thought you needed to find what you truly deserve.